Hello, everyone. This is King Narrative. I'm here to address a topic on Black America and immigration. More specifically, this is a reply to sincere ignorance of thought crimes. Now, before I start, Thought Crimes is a great platform for black millennials and black people in general. It's a great platform. It's a lot of knowledge that they give to people that is very unprecedented to people because mainstream media is a very biased platform in which people only have, I'll say, a selective knowledge on particular things. But I want to address this whole thing with immigration. Now, sincere, you made 2 points in one comment in which I want to address here. Now, beginning with this point that you made about building up communities in one comment. Now, I'm just quoting from what you said. Most black Africans move into predominantly black communities and help with building. Now, this is somewhat of a false narrative and is somewhat true. Now, you have the H-1B visa program in which immigrants come to this nation and they are granted a 6-month stay. But what happens is many immigrants overstay those visas. And what happens, they're allowed to actually make more income than the people that are native born of this country. Now, with the whole thing about black Africans moving into predominantly black neighborhoods and helping with building, that's not true. Only way they do so unless it benefits them. They're the beneficiaries of that. Now, with black Americans, when they move to communities with black Americans, because I know you're from the tri-state area, you see this. It's most common there. But when the diaspora of people move into predominantly African American communities, there's no assistance to African Americans. What you see is African Americans being pushed out, and the diaspora of people, those from the Caribbean, those from Asia, those from Africa, move in as the replacements. They're the replacement blacks. Now, you see this in places like Harlem, Minnesota, Chicago, even places like Philly. You see this. I know I'll come to a Thought Crimes video here and there, and I know that you seem like a very traveled person as far as when it comes to the country. And to give by example of what I'm talking about, Minnesota has a very high African population, but African Americans are doing horrible there economically. Same thing in places like Harlem. African Americans are being pushed out, and those are from the Caribbean islands and from the continent are replacing them, and they're doing well. So the correlation between black Africans and Caribbeans helping African Americans and building up these communities is actually a very false narrative. Now, to elaborate more on the H-1B visa program, when various foreigners come to this nation, as I said, is a process of when they get these visas, and they overstay these visas. And what happens is you have these various corporations, like tech corporations, or just your common job like a McDonald's or even a warehouse job. Let's say the person works 40 to 48 hours a week. They can actually add 100 more hours if they wanted to on their timesheets. Yes, this is true. I even know some lady down the street from me, she even told me this, where she writes, at least 160 hours a week and cashing in real big. And what happens is they use other various family members as fronts to not get caught. So this is actually going against African Americans' interests when you have various things like that, because what that is doing is driving down the wages. It's driving down the wages. Now, when various groups come over here, there's a great misconception, and I'm speaking on those that come from the continent and the Caribbean islands. There's a great misconception of them coming from these impoverished dirt roads, shantytown type of areas. That's not true. That is not always true. A majority, many, let me correct myself, many of those from the continent and the islands actually come from well to do families with, getting assistance in private education. This is why you see the numbers of, many Nigerian Americans doing much better than any ethnic group in the country. And, some of these numbers of, blacks in, schools is due to those of the African continent, such as the Ivy League schools. There are only, I'll say, under 5% of African Americans in these Ivy League schools. Most of the people that you see in these Ivy League schools are from the continent. They're not us. So, once again, we're being replaced before our very eyes. Now, Sincere, I understand that this is dear to you because you're the child of immigrants. You're probably second or third generation American. My family's been here for at least 8 to 10 generations, and we're still not getting anything out of the deal. Now, I could go in depth into history, which I'm going to do in another video, but I'm not going to do it in this video. But, many of us African Americans fought for various other nations to, better themselves in this nation. But we always get the back burner, and no one else helps us, whether, they have the same skin tone or same hair texture. They don't help us. There's no correlation between those of the African continent and those of the islands helping us. It's just not a correlation. Now, another thing is us as African Americans have to deal with when it comes to immigration over here is we have to deal with these sanctuary cities. Now, recently in the news, there's been a thing of Texas and California being sanctuary states. Now, I believe it's the governor of Texas. He cut that off completely, of Texas being a sanctuary state. Now, California, on the other hand, they're trying to legislate a bill to where all of California can be a sanctuary, state. And really what this would do is break off California from the United States. And I've stated this in my past videos about America being, broken up into parts. It's going to happen. This is why I, suggest African Americans to move down south in the southeastern region, because you're done in the West Coast, you're done out east. In the Midwest, it's still a power struggle, but most likely we're going to be done here also. So I just suggest you to move down south. Now, some of our people, they're going to stay in these various cities, but this country's always been a numbers game, which we'll be getting into that point next. With the sanctuary cities, there's a correlation between the immigrant population and black unemployment. Whenever you see these high number of immigrants coming into these cities, you see a high unemployment of African Americans. Now, for example, on the south side of Chicago, you're starting to see more and more Mexican Americans or illegal immigrants coming into these areas. Now, the south side of Chicago is a very high unemployed area, and we should all know this because Chicago's been on the news for the past 8 years when Obama was in office. You should know this. So, what you're seeing is many illegal immigrants jumping over, once again, over the backs of African Americans and able to get these jobs, and African Americans taking the back burner and are being unemployed. And we know the result of unemployment. You get bad communities, can barely get by as far as paying bills, getting, the essential things that you need to survive, such as food and water. Not to say that many African Americans aren't getting those things even when they're unemployed, but the state of Black America is getting worse and worse, and immigration is a part of that problem. This is why I'm not understanding you, which, well, I already addressed that, but I would think if someone that's, second, third generation American will understand that immigration would bury African Americans. But I know where your sentiments are with this, but this isn't in African Americans' best interest, especially when you have these sanctuary cities. Like I said, Chicago, the South Side, you having all these immigrants coming into the South Side, which also assists in gentrification. And on the north side of Chicago is where you see most of the people from the continent and the islands. Not on the south side assisting Black folks, not assisting African Americans, but they're on the north side. I mean, there are some African Americans on the north side, but most African Americans reside on the south side and parts on the west side. And on the west side, you have a lot of Puerto Ricans. They aren't assisting African Americans in jobs. So what's the big deal with us having to assist everybody else and no one assists us? This is why you see the outrage of African Americans not wanting to help other people as far as this ban that Trump has put down. It's a very, basically not having this tolerance for other groups of people anymore. It's a low tolerance. Now, the numbers game. Now, stating the second part of the one comment that you made, you said that white people know this, which is why they don't care what European white comes into the country. Their population is strengthened and they stay the majority. Now, white Americans are very desperate whenever they, do that. And you have to think about their birth rate and fertility rate, which is very low. And it actually came out a few months ago that more of them are dying than are being birthed. Meanwhile, on the African American side, we don't have that issue. And what you see is this 13% myth has, been so ingrained in our, into our minds so much that we actually believe that we're 13% of the population now. What you've been seeing when people throw out those stats is social engineering. Because whenever you have the general census of a population, you have to look at other statistics. Like whenever they say 1 in 4 African Americans have AIDS or have contracted HIV, that means every other month I should be going to a funeral of someone that I know. But no, that's not happening. Why? Because this is social engineering going on within our population. Our population, if I had to estimate of us being here nearly 400 years in this country, I would probably have to estimate around somewhere in the 20% bracket. We're definitely up there because the U.S. Census plays with numbers. I remember seeing something some years ago where they were talking about HIV and AIDS, and what they done was they put Puerto Ricans and Dominicans under African Americans to make it seem like African Americans had more, contracted more HIV and AIDS. But any other time, Dominicans and Puerto Ricans are a whole separate entity, whole different group, separate than us. So why is that? Why are they in the census of that? They play with our numbers because they want us to. When you tell a group that you're very small in population, it gets to them mentally. It gets to you mentally. And you feel like that, you're nothing inside this world when you're small in population. But we're not small in population. There's no way we're small in population in the fact that, you had in the 1970s, many African Americans, we had the highest birth rate and fertility rate. And not to mention the millennial generation, what a lot of people don't know is the most populous generation, even more so than the baby boomers. Because Charles Darwin said that species will react in two ways. They will react in violence or sex. And you had a lot of that going on in the 70s and 80s. So our population has to be bigger than that so-called 13%. And let's get into some Darwinism. When you have those two examples that I gave you, the violence. Now, there's a lot of frustration with violence. People get so riled up in violence. And what we do as a population to, alleviate that violence, we actually go have sex. Sex has always been an alleviator in our community since we've been here. It's more of an alleviator than, actually passing on your seed to have children. Not to say that we don't do that, because of course we do that, but we use sex as more of a alleviator of societal, pressures. So there's no way that our population is 13%. Now, I just want to end this off sincere by saying us as African Americans, we have to build ourselves up before inviting anybody else. Even MLK said that he integrated us into a burning house. Now, if our house is burnt, we're outside struggling, and you have all these other groups looking at us to hand them resources, we can't be the ones to do it. We have to build ourselves up before doing so. So, I don't understand why those of the continent can't, grant us some type of citizenship. Now, you do have one country like Ghana that does this. Ghana's the only nation in the African continent that's, handing out dual citizenship to African Americans. Now, a lot of us don't know that. And we need to look into that more. But they're the only nation that's doing so. Other than that, I don't know what to tell you. Maybe, you're turned off by this and, just have a selective bias because, you're the child of, immigrants, second or third generation. And your sentiments is going to be more on immigration than us of African Americans that's actually been here for 8 to 10 generations. Immigration has never been a factor that has assisted us. It's always been a factor that has buried us more than assisted us. Until us as African Americans can build our own selves up, we can't accept other people. King Narrative out.